In 1964, an organization known as Gentek would create the deadliest virus known to man, red light. Decades later, in 2009, under the orders from Blackwatch, Dr. Alex Mercer would use his virus to genetically engineer a new virus that surpassed its destructive properties, which would then be dubbed Blacklight. Shortly after the virus's creation, Dr. Mercer's team would be killed off, and knowing he would be next, Alex took a sample of the virus and fled, but would be cornered in Penn Station. With no other option, Mercer smashed open the vial and unleashed the virus just before he was gunned down. The Blacklight virus would then break down and reconstruct Alex's body, and through the body, the virus would again gain consciousness and would wake up in a morgue. Without any memories, the virus would believe itself to be Mercer and would flee, eventually finding its way to Alex's sister, Dana, who would inform the virus that Elizabeth Green would become a carrier for the original red light strand. Upon meeting Green, she would break free, telling Alex that in a way she was his mother. Alex would then track down an old lover of Mercer's, Karen Parker, and would work with her to find out more about the outbreak, but would ultimately be betrayed and led into a trap set by Karen and a specialist. And to make things even worse, Dana would then be kidnapped by one of Green's hunters, and Alex would be forced to rescue her before the same specialist would contact Alex, and with his information would be able to kill Elizabeth and find out the truth. The two would then uncover a plot to nuke New York, and together they would assassinate a general before the specialist would reveal himself to be an infected, and would fight with Alex, believing that if he consumed Alex he would become all powerful. But Alex would ultimately be victorious, decapitating the Supreme Hunter. Alex would then pilot a helicopter and would take the nuke out to sea where it would detonate. Alex would then return to the city to deal with any remaining Blackwatch or Blacklight presence. However, eventually Alex would completely lose faith in humanity, growing to see them as weak, and eventually decided that humanity was too far gone to save, and he would start manipulating the virus even further, eventually releasing it once again back into New York. Now working to infiltrate Blackwatch and Gentek through proxies, Alex would take an interest in a man named James Heller after watching him kill a brawler with only a knife. Alex, seeing potential in Heller, would then infect him. This would horribly backfire, as James had his own goal of avenging his wife and daughter, whom Alex had gotten killed by unleashing the virus. James would then confront Alex, who had discovered and kidnapped his daughter Amaya, to lure James out, and eventually the two would face off, with James being victorious and would consume Alex, ending his plans for good. Cletus Cassidy was born to Roscoe and Louise Cassidy in the Ravencroft Institute for the Criminally Insane. At only 19 minutes old, Cletus would die due to complications involving his umbilical cord, but would be resurrected by the dark god Null. This event would instill a bloodlust in Cassidy that would last his entire life. This bloodlust would manifest as early as the age of 6, when Cletus pushed his grandmother down the stairs, killing her, as well as killing his mother's dog, Fifi. Upon seeing this, Luis would also be attacked, but would gain the upper hand just when Roscoe would come home to see Luis trying to kill Cletus, and in order to defend his son, he would kill her in response. However, when questioned by the cops, Cletus claimed Roscoe had murdered her for no reason, resulting in his execution. Cletus would then be placed in an orphanage where he would murder one of the disciplinary staff, push a girl in front of a bus, and would eventually burn the entire building down with most of the other children still inside. As an adult, Cletus would become a notorious serial killer, but would be arrested and placed in a cell with the supervillain Eddie Brock, otherwise known as Venom. The two would have a very antagonistic relationship, and eventually Cletus would plan to murder Eddie. But before he could, the Venom symbiote would return and rescue Brock. But as it left, the symbiote would give birth. This offspring would then bond with Cletus, and the two would become known as Carnage. Carnage would then break free and would go on a citywide killing spree before eventually being defeated by the combined efforts of Venom and Spider-Man. However, thanks to the symbiote, Carnage is constantly able to break free and continue murdering, and even after all this time, is still one of the most deadly beings in the Marvel Universe. Recently becoming an Avengers level threat who has taken on and defeated beings as strong as the Hulk. Currently, Cletus and the symbiote are separated, with the symbiote operating without a host, mentoring a young serial killer, and Cletus ironically seeming to have become a symbiote himself, being trapped in the mind of a detective, with the two now working against one another. But how this situation will unfold is currently unknown, but regardless, I doubt the outcome will be good for anyone involved. Hello and welcome everyone to the first remake video of the 4th season of my Mercer series, where I will once again be tackling Alex Mercer from Prototype up against Marvel Comics' Carnage to see just how these two stack up against each other with updated and more accurate scaling for both. Now, that being said, if you know anything about Spider-Man scaling, that means I have no choice but to equalize the stats, as Spider-Man scaling is actually a lot more impressive than I gave it credit for the first time I did this fight. To put it bluntly, Peter alone absolutely dominates Alex in a fight physically, and Carnage is consistently shown to be well above him in a physical capacity, which I will be explaining in the physical section right now. Physically, the virus most commonly takes the form of Dr. Alex Mercer, who is a 29-year-old human standing at 5 feet 10 inches tall, or 178 centimeters, and weighed 190 pounds or 86 kilograms. However, thanks to the virus's ability to alter its physical properties, its height, weight, and shape are all dependent on how it uses its biomass. Starting with strength, Alex is an incredibly strong opponent, being capable of effortlessly busting down a metal door. He has consistently been shown to be able to punch, rip, and cut apart both humans and other infected with ease, including the Hunters and Juggernauts, which can tank high-powered military explosives, can pick up and throw cars hard enough to destroy military helicopters with little to no difficulty, as well as casually ripping a helicopter out of the air and throwing it. With his physical blows alone, he damaged Elizabeth Green in her hive mind form, and even more impressively, with a single arm, casually threw most of a tank, which, assuming it is a standard US military-issue tank, can weigh up to 73 tons, as well as lifting his hammer fist, which should weigh more considering how much more effort he needs when using it compared to his tank feat. And finally could match James Heller, who was capable of similar strength. However, even with all of that, he is not all powerful, and has been overpowered by other infected, namely the Supreme Hunter, Elizabeth Green, and once again, James Heller. When it comes to movement speed, Alex is much faster than a normal human, being capable of running so fast he can run up the side of a building, as well as outrunning military vehicles such as helicopters and outpacing cars with his running speed alone. In terms of combat speed, he blocked around from a grenade launcher after it had been fired, and has been shown to be a match for an infected James Heller, who could react to and counter rockets, even deflecting them back at their shooter. This is even more impressive when you consider that James, as a normal human, was fast enough to keep pace with Alex in hand-to-hand combat, easily fighting around him despite Alex's impressive combat speed, and Alex later matched a far faster James. And while I personally believe these next few examples to simply be aim dodging, it can be argued that he's been capable of dodging automatic gunfire, given a few pages of the comic where he is running from gunfire without being hit. And for the sake of this breakdown, I will be treating these feats as though they are high-speed bullet dodging feats, placing him at hypersonic levels of speed. As a polymorphic lump of biomass in the shape of a human, Alex doesn't really have a limit to his stamina like you or I would. However, his abilities do seem to diminish as he takes more damage, implying that not just his enhanced abilities, but his general abilities are reliant on this factor. While Alex doesn't resist damage any more than a normal human, he can tank far more thanks to him not having any internal organs that are damaged by physical trauma, allowing him to fight until he has taken so much damage he physically cannot move. On top of this, he has an amazing healing factor capable of repairing himself from all sorts of damage, as shown when he immediately repaired himself after being shot by a squad of Blackwatch soldiers, can survive hits from powerful infected, with a basic infected zombie being strong enough to tear a person apart. He was only stunned after getting hit by Elizabeth Green, who should have a similar level of strength to himself. He was seemingly unhurt after being knocked out of a skyscraper by a hunter. He got right back up after being hit by a missile from a military helicopter, and was only temporarily incapacitated from having the majority of his body destroyed by a nuke, only needing to absorb a crow in order to fully regenerate. However, it should be stated that if he hadn't absorbed this crow, he would have died. Leading me into my next point, which is his limit. Should Alex run out of biomass and be unable to acquire more, his healing factor will run out and leave him vulnerable. Though, to be fair, this would require dealing out a massive amount of damage. Cletus Cassidy is a human male, presumably in his mid to late 30s, bonded with an alien symbiote capable of changing its physical abilities at will, such as its height, weight, and shape. Though as Cletus, they stand at 6 feet 1 inch tall or 185 centimeters and weighing 190 pounds or 86 kilograms. Carnage is insanely powerful, with recent comics making him to be one of Marvel's top hitters in terms of power, able to easily overpower a venomized Hulk and being on par with a Venom who later went on to kill Null, the god of symbiotes. However, for this breakdown, I will be using Carnage after the events of Absolute Carnage. Now, as a quick spoiler, that's not going to make much of a difference, but the Carnage in that series was enhanced by Null, so I will not be using any feats from that comic run and will instead be focusing on events before and after that comic run. However, I should note that thanks to recent comics giving Carnage a massive boost in power, he should be able to replicate the feats in that run and its tie-ins. Starting off with strength, Carnage is insanely strong, even while holding back, punching hard enough to fatally injure the average man. He has casually threw a man through a window, easily slashed through Magneto's armor. He put a man through stone and broke through a brick wall with only his tendrils. And with just his tendrils, he can lift and throw full-grown men, restrain and toss around both Spider-Man and Venom, and can fling cars weighing about 2 tons with ease. He's been shown to be able to rip apart a concrete road in his rampage, lifted and threw a helicopter hard enough to make it explode, ripped out a Sentinel's eye, and finally was strong enough to effortlessly throw both Spider-Man and Venom off of him, with both using their full strength, with Spider-Man officially being strong enough to lift 10 to 20 tons, and Venom being stated to be capable of lifting 50 to 60 tons. However, these statements aren't accurate, as Spider-Man has consistently shown feats that put his level of strength far over this limit, even being shown to be able to lift a tank, with the average tank weighing about 55 tons, and with Venom, according to official statements by Marvel and guidebooks, being anywhere from about 3 to 6 times stronger than Spider-Man. So going with the lowest at 3 times stronger, this means that Carnage, with a single arm, effortlessly overpowered Venom, pushing down on him with 165 tons of force. And considering the people Spider-Man has fought, he can easily be scaled much higher based off this, but we'll end with Spider-Man scaling there for now, and we'll end this with a very recent battle where Carnage fought and defeated the elf Malekith, who has fought and traded blows with Thor on multiple occasions, with Thor being a consistently top-tier hero in the Marvel power tiers. Carnage is similarly fast, if not more so. He's been shown to be fast enough to speed blitz groups of opponents on multiple occasions, including trained military squads as well as the Mercury team of symbiote hosts. And even without his suit, he speed blitzed 2 police officers. Even without the symbiote, he was fast enough to evade a strike from Spider-Man. He kept pace with and has been shown to be faster than Deadpool, who has been shown to be capable of dodging and deflecting bullets, as well as kept pace with the Punisher, who in this panel is explicitly shown to be as fast as a lightning strike. He's fought and kept pace with a group of Venoms fighting him at the same time, with Venom being consistently on par with, if not slightly faster than, Spider-Man. He caught Nova mid-flight, with Nova regularly flying at speeds faster than light. And no, that isn't an outlier. He's also speed blitzed Spider-Man on multiple occasions, with Spider-Man consistently being shown to be able to dodge light speed attacks, including lasers. And while yes, this is aided by the spider sense, Peter still needs to be capable of physically moving his body out of the way of these attacks after they have been fired, making these feats more than consistent, as well as several other direct faster than light plus feats, such as dodging a blast from Firestar, which as shown here is explicitly faster than light, all on top of keeping pace with Malekith, who scales to Thor, who has massively faster than light to immeasurable speed scaling. By now, I hope you're not expecting Carnage to be some sort of glass cannon in terms of his durability limits, as he's often been shown to no-sell attacks from heavy hitters. He flat out ignores bullets, was unharmed after getting put through a wall by Nova, walked off thousands of volts of electricity running through him, and immediately went back to fighting, immediately got right back up after 2 direct hits from military-grade missiles, seeming to barely even having noticed the attack. No-sold getting hit by a repulsor ray, which should burn him. Flat out ignored a blast of fire magic from an elf, got right back up after being run over by a semi-truck. He has taken multiple beatdowns from Venom over the years, who, as I've stated before, should be stronger than Spider-Man. He was fine after being thrown across a city by Toxin, who is even stronger than Carnage himself. Survived a blast from Nova and got right back into the fight, even though the blast was so powerful it injured Cletus through the symbiote. Tanked a magic blast from Dr. Doom, and even laughed off full-powered strikes from Spider-Man and his clone Kane, with Peter consistently being strong enough to stagger the Hulk, at a bare minimum placing Peter at city level. However, we have a feat placing him over this. In the Axis event comic, Carnage smothered and suppressed a bomb that, at the bare minimum, was going to spread its blast across the surface of a planet, as well as surviving a hit from Firestar, who has the attack potency to damage a Herald of Galactus, and finally tanked hits from Malekith, an enemy of Thor who has traded blows with him on multiple occasions. So, would you actually believe that this category has gotten wider since the last time I did this fight? Because, yeah, turns out Carnage has far better feats in scaling than I thought. Even with me being far more generous and giving him feats from the second game and comics, it still doesn't make a difference. Strength is the closest area in this fight. coming down to Alex's best feat of strength, which has him throwing a tank with one arm. Ignoring that the tank had been destroyed and was missing its top half, the most favorable way to look at this means that Alex casually tossed an M1A2 SEP V3, which weighs 73.6 tons, meaning his casual strength limit with both arms in this way of looking at it would be more than 147 tons. In comparison, Carnage scales to Spider-Man and Venom, combining their strength, which using the average weight of a tank at 55 tons and considering that Venom is at least 3 times stronger, this means that in that moment, Carnage casually overpowered a combined 220 tons of force, but with a single arm overpowered 165 tons and placing his casual strength limit with both arms at 330 tons. And keep in mind, these numbers are me heavily lowballing Carnage and giving Alex the most favorable interpretation of these feats as I can. And just in case anyone doubts the tank scaling on Spider-Man or believes it to be an outlier, no. He has consistently performed many feats throughout the years on a similar level, such as the time he lifted up a locomotive, supported a landing plane, dropped an entire building on Venom, and has consistently shown to be able to stagger the Hulk, which could very easily be used to place him, and by extension Carnage, much higher. That was just an average and consistent strength feat that I can put a solid number on. Like, thanks to the current Carnage run, he's complex multiversal because of that fight with Malekith. Speed is nowhere even remotely close. But the most favorable scaling you can give Alex has him being a high-end bullet timer, which would come out to hypersonic speeds. However, even with the most generous scaling you can give Alex, Carnage is still so much faster it does not matter. Carnage, through consistent scaling to Spider-Man, Superior Spider-Man, and Deadpool, even managing to blitz all of them on multiple occasions, with each hero having relativistic scaling with lightning dodging feats to faster than light reaction speeds with the Spider-Mans, which is once again very consistent as shown in their many times reacting to and dodging lasers, some of which are explicitly stated to be light speed. Not to mention dodging a blast of energy explicitly shown to be light speed from Firestar. Durability comes down to the nuke feat on Alex's end and Carnage's Axis event bomb feat. Now, starting with Alex, calling this a nuke level feat is really generous, if not flat out dishonest. Alex barely survived being of a nuclear blast while in the protection of a military-grade helicopter, and even then was reduced to mush and wouldn't have survived if he hadn't gotten lucky and have a crow take a bite out of him. Meanwhile, Carnage's bomb feat relies a lot less on looking at it in the most favorable lighting. Taking the bomb at the lowest you can consider it as a biological weapon rather than a pure or even mixed explosive, the bomb would still have needed enough force to cover the entire planet in a biological agent, giving him roughly planet surface level durability considering he all but nullified the blast. And once again, I could very easily scale Carnage higher up to high complex multiversal, but I will be keeping it here for now. So for all these reasons, I will be equalizing the stats, but still granting Carnage the slight edge in physical abilities.
As a shapeshifter, Alex has several powers that he can switch to at will for any situation. His first ability is the power to absorb any biological creature, granting him their shape as well as their memories. However, when it comes to powerful beings like the infected, they must first be weakened before he can perform this. The first of his polymorphic abilities are his claws, which can rip through people with no issue and has the ability to generate a giant spike under a target, inflicting massive damage or ripping his opponent apart. His hammer fist forms his fist into large metal balls capable of destroying tanks in just a few blows. He can also use them to throw himself large distances using momentum. Whip Fist turns his arm into an extendable whip-like weapon that can rip through multiple opponents at once, or be used to snatch opponents closer from a distance similar to Scorpion's rope spear. Or it can be used as a grapple hook, bringing himself closer to an object he wishes to use. Muscle mass increases his strength to the point where he can rip a person in two or even lift more than usual. His blade is his most powerful weapon, capable of cutting through tanks and special infected alike, giving it the power of the hammer fist but the speed of the claws. His shield creates a shield made of biomass that can protect him from some damage but will eventually break and will need to reform. His armor is basically a more sturdy version of the shield that doesn't break but does slow him down significantly, covering his entire body in a material that I believe is similar to chitin, the material arthropods' exoskeletons are made of. After consuming Elizabeth Green, Alex gained the ability to act as a hive mind for the infected, letting him control the lesser infected types and have them act how he sees fit. When consuming more biomass than necessary, Alex gains the ability to expel that biomass in the form of a Devastator attack. His first Devastator involves him shooting out a massive amount of tendrils in all directions. His second Devastator is more or less the same, but with the tendrils being focused in one direction. His final Devastator takes the form of massive spikes that erupt from the ground. As a symbiote, Carnage has a wide plethora of abilities, with the standard enhanced strength, speed, and durability being only the start. Starting off, Carnage has an insane healing factor. He can completely regenerate entire destroyed body parts in seconds, having his head destroyed multiple times, and at most being stunned, as well as being able to keep Cletus alive for months while floating in the vacuum of space. It's also been shown that Carnage can fully regenerate Cletus after death, even reviving him as a full skeleton, and after this keeping Cletus' mind alive inside the symbiote, even after the Carnage symbiote was removed from the Grendel symbiote. They also have an amazing capacity for shapeshifting, being able to perfectly replicate its surroundings to blend in, becoming invisible to the naked eye. And even more impressively, the ability to form any weapon he wishes. Claws, blades, maces, spikes, axes. If they can be used to mutilate, maim, or generally inflict suffering, Carnage can and will make it, using everything at his disposal at once to attack from multiple angles. He's also shown the capacity to form wings and take flight, showing that they can mimic other organs found in nature for mobility. Going along with that last ability, Carnage can fire pieces of itself as a projectile. Not just limited to simple pieces of itself or spikes, Carnage can throw the entirety of a weapon they have formed as a ranged weapon, as well as control them after the fact. Carnage has also been shown to use these abilities to replicate the powers of Spider-Man, creating a webbing to swing around for better mobility or to restrain his targets, stopping them from fleeing and keeping them immobile. Carnage can also take biomass from its surroundings, absorbing the flesh of his victims or anything that just so happens to be dead when he got there, as shown in Carnage USA when he absorbed the biomass of an entire slaughterhouse and grew the symbiote to massive proportions to infect an entire small town. In the same comic, Carnage has been shown to be able to fully control living organisms by covering them in the symbiote, effectively creating copies of itself to fight alongside the original, allowing Carnage to get a numbers advantage so long as there are living creatures nearby to take over. This isn't just limited to living organisms, however. In the 2010 Carnage comic run, Carnage took over the Iron Ranger suits and converted them into a heavy armor that took the combined attacks of Shriek, Iron Man, and Spider-Man to bring down. Now, while it could be argued that this is only due to the Iron Rangers being made with pieces of the Carnage symbiote, there's evidence to support that he could do this with any piece of technology. In the same comic, he managed to partially infect the Iron Man suit, forcing Tony to sever his connection to stop a takeover. Carnage has also shown other examples that he can integrate himself with non-organic matter, such as the time he merged into and manipulated the internet. No, really, this happened, and it's consistent, meaning that if Carnage being a part of the non-organic material is the requirement, he can simply move into it at any point in the fight. And very recently, the Carnage symbiote has shown the ability to be capable of manipulating and taking the powers of other superpowered individuals for itself, as shown with Hydro Man when Carnage used his molecules to create a portal, and after absorbing a piece of Hydro Man, this ability became the symbiotes. Later doing the exact same thing with Spot and gaining access to the Spotted dimension, and before that in the Absolute Carnage storyline, when Carnage ate the spine of a Ghost Rider, he temporarily gained her powers, becoming the Carnage of Vengeance. And in the same recent comic, it's been shown that Carnage can ignore conventional durability and bypass armor, attacking on the atomic level, meaning that he is able to rip his opponents apart atom by atom. Yeah, this is another one of those times when the result is really obvious and I can't even pretend otherwise. Starting with shapeshifting, based on what we're shown, Carnage has far more weapons he can morph his body into, as in all appearances, Alex sticks to the same set of powers. And while I'd argue it's only speculation to say otherwise, even if you say that Alex can similarly freely manipulate his form, that only evens this area out, as both would only be limited to their imaginations. However, Alex's upsides end there. And yes, a stalemate based on pure speculation is his only upside here. Carnage has far more resistance in his ability to regenerate, keeping Cletus alive for months in the vacuum of space and after the bomb from the Axis event all on its own, while Alex, after being on the outskirts of a nuke, needed to absorb more biomass in order to survive. Both can bypass their ability to an extent, Alex by infecting people with his virus at a cellular level, and Carnage attacking the atoms of his opponents themselves. Now, I really hope I don't need to tell you that the atomic level is far deeper than the cellular level, but if I do, it's estimated that the average cell is made up of 100 trillion atoms, giving Carnage far deeper durability negation. And by extension, this means that Carnage's control over organisms is superior as well, as he can control them on a far deeper level. Carnage also has the advantage of being able to manipulate non-organic matter, being able to integrate it into his biomass and giving him access to material that Alex couldn't manipulate or absorb, even should Carnage become weakened enough for his biomass to be consumed. Speaking of biomass absorption, this is another area where, at best, it's a stalemate. Both can absorb biomass from their enemies, and both can take memories from this absorbed biomass. Not to mention, both having a form of genetic memory. Alex through the hive mind, and Carnage through the far simpler symbiote genetics. And finally, Alex has never shown the ability to manipulate powers like Carnage has. Now, granted, this is most likely because there are no other forms of powers in his universe, but even so, Carnage's application of this ability is once again far more effective due to his atomic manipulation and the ability to steal magic-based powers, as shown with the Ghost Rider. No matter how you slice it, Alex is simply at a disadvantage here. His best arguments are that in certain areas, he could theoretically stalemate Carnage, who has the clear advantage everywhere else. Carnage unquestionably gets the edge in special abilities.
Honestly, it's impossible to say for certain just how many fighting styles Alex knows or has even mastered, as he's consumed countless soldiers and civilians alike. In terms of using his shape-shifting abilities, Alex takes a simple approach of simply ripping apart his opponents rather than implementing any kind of skill or techniques aside from very basic ones. In theory, Alex should be a master tactician, as all the soldiers and higher-up military officials he's absorbed should give him intimate knowledge of military combat tactics as well as counter tactics. With his powers, Alex has shown skilled and diverse use of shape-shifting abilities, using his powers to exploit the different strengths and weaknesses of his opponents, from the brute force of his hammer fists to the fast-paced claws, or even utilizing his shape-shifting on the fly in order to stealthily infiltrate his enemy's facility.
While Carnage is officially a completely untrained combatant, that has in no way held the symbiote serial killer back, standing up to and more often than not defeating some of the planet's most skilled fighters, overwhelming them with this raw ferocity alone. And while we don't have any specific examples of what type of combat he prefers, we have more than enough examples to get a general level of his skill. Cletus himself has been shown to be a vicious fighter. He killed a pair of armed police officers with just a knife, even without the symbiote. He kept up with Captain America and had the upper hand against Flash Thompson, though to be clear, neither had their symbiotes or legs during this fight. He's fought and defeated several high-level combatants over the years. In the Absolute Carnage run, he took on 2 Ghost Riders at once, even managing to kill one. He's beaten Venom as well as Agent Venom on multiple occasions, including team-ups with the Scarlet Spider Kane. He outfought Deadpool, even managing to hold his own while Wade had 5 different symbiotes on at once, and regularly outfights Spider-Man, who, after receiving training from Iron Fist, has become one of the best hand-to-hand combatants in the Marvel Universe. Carnage also has generations of experience, having the genetic memory of each of his ancestors as well as their hosts, giving him the genetic experience of thousands of unique fighters, including Deadpool, who outfought the Punisher, a man who regularly stands up to superhumans despite having no powers, and in early years Spider-Man, as well as the experience from his other hosts, such as the Green Goblin, Eddie Brock, who should have the genetic memory of Scorpion, Anti-Venom, Flash Thompson, and a modern Spider-Man who's far more skilled, and the Silver Surfer, who has thousands, if not billions, of years of experience. While both Alex and Carnage are impressive fighters who have more experience than any one combatant could attain in a standard lifetime, even with some baseline similarities, there is a massive gap that makes the outcome very clear. Starting with experience, it's a little hard to quantify, considering we don't know exactly how many people Alex has consumed throughout the games. However, chances are the amount of actual combatants made up a pretty good majority of them, considering he regularly fights soldiers and Blackwatch soldiers. Meanwhile, we can actually place a pretty good guess on Carnage's level of experience, as he is the 999th symbiote in his genetic line. So, assuming that every symbiote before Venom had only 2 hosts, Carnage would, at a bare minimum, have 1,994 combined lifetimes of experience. And that's before taking into account all of Venom's and Carnage's hosts, some of whom, like Wolverine and the Silver Surfer, have had hundreds, if not thousands, of years of experience, which more than likely puts Carnage's combined experience over Alex's. However, I'll throw Alex a bone and say that they have an equal amount of experience. But, well, that doesn't give Alex as big of an advantage as you'd think, as some of the single people Carnage has fought would have more skill than all of Alex's combined experience alone, including Spider-Man, Deadpool, and Captain America. Not to mention, Carnage should have the genetic memory of some of these characters, having infected Captain America, Wolverine, and once again, the genetic memory of Venom's hosts. Simply put, there's no arguing Alex is more skilled than any of these fighters, let alone someone who has the knowledge of all of them. And so, I grant Carnage the edge in combat skills and tactics, as well as declare him the victor of this fight. Let's set up this battle. Let's say it takes place just after the events of the first prototype game and that Carnage has just escaped to captivity once again and has started raiding hell. Cletus Cassidy didn't know what was wrong with the city. He didn't know why the meatbags were suddenly all weird looking or why the military had been called in. And truth be told, he really didn't care. Carnage was having the time of his life, ripping apart infected and soldiers alike. All they really cared about was that this was their kind of chaos. Meanwhile, Alex is watching from the top of a nearby building, and after deciding that he needs to take down whatever he's looking at, eventually drops down in an attempt to crush Carnage. But thanks to the duo's 360 vision, they're able to spin around and catch Mercer before slamming the virus headfirst into the ground, splattering his skull open onto the pavement. Alex regenerates almost instantly and gets back up and attacks Carnage, using his martial arts to land several blows to the surprised symbiote before Carnage lashes out, forming blades on his arms and cutting several chunks out of Alex. Alex, in turn, responds by forming his claws and returning the favor, but it seems like none of the damage Carnage takes seems to stick, as they give out just as much punishment as before. This continues for a minute, both simply regrowing the damage dealt by the other until Alex decides to make a tactical retreat in order to obtain more biomass, and jumps up onto the side of a nearby building. However, before he can make it very far, Carnage jumps up right next to Mercer, asking,
"And just where do you think you're going?"
before closing the distance and pouncing on Mercer. Carnage immediately begins ripping at Alex, before a blade stabs them and is pulled up, bisecting them from the waist up. Alex would then kick Carnage away before finding a few infected to consume, before turning back around just in time to see Carnage leap at him yet again. Alex dodges to the side and is about to strike at Carnage with his hammer fist when tendrils shoot out of Carnage's side and slash and stab at Alex, nearly cutting him in half. Quickly forming a shield, Alex takes a defensive stance and forms his blade as well. However, before Alex can properly respond, Carnage backhands the shield, shattering it and tossing Alex back. Not having given up on his protection, Alex forms his armor before jumping up and bringing his blade down, only for Carnage to catch the limb and rip it off, before grabbing Alex by the throat and having tendrils burrow into his body before ripping out in all directions, tearing Alex apart. Alex then uses his tendrils to move the chunks of ripped flesh around, absorbing as much biomass as he can before reforming in front of Carnage and unleashing a concentrated mass of tendrils that rip Carnage apart. However, just as soon as he's torn apart, Carnage is back up and on Alex before it can react. And this time, he uses the symbiote to restrain Alex as he pulls the virus limb from limb, tearing him apart until he is reduced to the consistency of chunky salsa. As Carnage looks down at his handiwork with a smile on his face, a lump of flesh fires its own tendril at Carnage and begins trying to break him down. Carnage begins to laugh as they realize what the virus is attempting. Then, using their own mass, the symbiote overpowers the virus and absorbs it before letting out a cackle and resuming his slaughter. And with that, I declare Carnage, the symbiote serial killer, the winner. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I never thought this outcome would change, even with equalized stats. Once again, for physical abilities, Carnage is plain and simply built different. Scaling above Spider-Man, who is on his own city level and faster than light, which on its own would place Peter safely over Alex in terms of physical abilities. And Venom, let alone Carnage, has consistently been shown to be so physically powerful that Spider-Man can't contend with them in a straight-up fight, and must look for other ways to end the battle. In fact, I outright considered not equalizing the stats because it simply wouldn't matter. Alex in no way, shape, or form stands up to Carnage. Carnage is a far superior shapeshifter, showing more variety in the comics alone than Alex has in every medium he's been in. Not to mention simply having more control over his abilities. While Alex's virus attacks on a cellular level, Carnage has been shown to attack on an atomic level. Not to mention, Alex has never shown the ability to be able to manipulate powers of others like Carnage can. Now, on paper, you could argue that Alex would technically have better hand-to-hand combatant, given his hundreds or more likely thousands of lifetimes worth of combat experience and training from the soldiers and occasional well-trained civilians. However, Carnage would have a similar level of combined experience based on the genetic memory passed down by the other symbiotes. Not to mention, no one Alex has consumed is on the same level as the people Carnage goes up against regularly, including Deadpool, who 1v1'd and killed a version of himself skilled enough to wipe out an entire multiverse. Spider-Man, who after training with Iron Fist and developing his own combat style, has become one of the best hand-to-hand combatants in the Marvel Universe, and Captain America, who in a canon crossover event with the DC, stalemated the mainline comic version of Batman, who even admitted that Cap could beat him. Simply put, Alex never stood a chance here due to the fact that Prototype in comparison is far more grounded. But that's just my opinion. What do you think? Do you agree that Alex has no options, like, at all in this fight? Or do you, no, really, like, please explain to me if you think Alex can beat Carnage. I want to hear this argument. Right, with all that, I've been Ray932, and I will see you very soon for the premiere of Season 4.